On my birthday, I received a bank transaction record showing a transfer of 131,400 yuan to someone else's account from my husband's phone. I was just about to call him to ask where the money had gone when I accidentally came across a moment post from his young intern secretary. The best gift for love. It read. Attached were 2 photos, one of the 131,400 yuan transfer receipt, and another of her holding hands with my husband. I had just clicked like when my husband called in a fluster to explain, today's Lenore's birthday. I was just putting on a show for her, don't take it to heart. I let out a bitter laugh. Then turned around and froze all his bank cards on the spot. As long as he doesn't touch my money, I truly don't care about anything else. One on my birthday. I waited for Julian at the restaurant for a full 10 hours. My mood faded from anticipation to calmness. As dusk fell, the golden glow of the setting sun slowly vanished between the tall buildings. And finally, stars filled the entire sky. I took out my phone and sent Julian a message. My heart heavy with disappointment. Julian, is this what you meant by spending quality time with me? But no sooner had I sent the message than I received a text notification of a 131,400 yuan transfer from my account. I frowned in confusion. He had no time to reply to my messages or keep our appointment. But he had time to spend money like this? I was just about to call Julian to ask what was going on when I accidentally tapped into Moments. And in the next second, I found out where that 130,000 yuan had gone. The latest post was from Julian's intern secretary. It included a group photo and a screenshot of the 131,400 yuan transfer. The caption read, "The best gift for love." And the man in the photo, the one who had made such a lavish transfer, was my husband, who had been out of contact for an entire day. My eyes stung instantly. The two of them looked so intimate in the photo. If I weren't Julian's wife, I might even have applauded their love. A bitter smile tugged at my lips. My chest ached. I had never imagined Julian would cheat on me so openly. But then again, hadn't I already found the answer to whether Julian loved me over these 3 years? Toward me, he was nothing but cold and polite. We were just strangers bound by the title of husband and wife. I suddenly felt exhausted. I had chased after Julian for so many years. And I really didn't want to waste any more time on him. It was meaningless. These 3 years had been like a dream, a delusional dream I'd woven for myself. At the thought, memories of the past flooded my mind uncontrollably. 6 years ago, I had met Julian by chance. On the side of the road, he'd navigated through traffic to carefully rescue a few stray kittens that were running around recklessly. That gentle, innocent look of his had made my heart flutter in an instant. Unfortunately, I was stuck in the middle of the traffic, and our encounter had been no more than a fleeting glance. He probably had no idea that there was a girl in the crowd who had silently thought of him for a long time. Later, by a twist of fate, I married Julian. I had thought it was meant to be, that we were destined for each other. Even though Julian had maintained a distant, respectful attitude toward me throughout these 3 years of marriage. But I hadn't minded at all. I'd always told myself that one day, Julian would fall in love with me too. It wasn't until today that I realized Julian had never been able to forget his first love. That was why he'd been so cold to me. It was all so pointless. Looking at my chat history with Julian, I saw how rarely he had taken the initiative to message me, just like his attitude toward me over these 3 years. Few kind words. Few warm expressions. Enough. Was he really still worth my love? I exited our chat window, then contacted a lawyer I knew well and asked him to help prepare divorce papers. Finally, I sent Julian one last message: "Let's get a divorce." Out of sheer spite, I clicked like on Julian's intern secretary's Moments post. And in the next second, Julian called. I hesitated for a moment, then answered. "Serafina, what are you throwing a fit about now? Today's Lenore's birthday. I was just putting on a show for her, don't take it to heart. Honestly, I don't even need to explain something this trivial to you. You're way too controlling. We're just husband and wife. Do you really need to restrict my freedom like this? Hello? Serafina, are you listening?" He fired off questions one after another, his tone growing more and more impatient, as if he were venting his own frustration. As if I were the one in the wrong. Ridiculous. I couldn't hold back a cold laugh. Julian, what about a low sigh? I don't care. Anyway, Headingway. We'll have nothing to do with each other soon. Which woman you spend time with is none of my business. Also, Awaso. I don't want to restrict your freedom. But who told you to use my money to transfer to your mistress? Julian probably thought I was just jealous. Because his tone softened a little. Wife. I know I shouldn't have missed your birthday. But you have everything: an amazing family background. A happy family. Lenore has nothing. She only has me. His words felt even more sarcastic. Was it my fault that I was wealthy and loved by my parents? I could feel my fingertips trembling as I held the phone. And even the sound of Julian's voice made me sick. I had thought my sincerity would eventually move him. But reality had slapped me hard across the face, leaving me dizzy and disoriented. Julian. I bit my lip hard and said in a hoarse voice, let's get a divorce. That way, you can take care of your little secretary openly and honestly. After speaking, I hung up the phone without hesitation. Then picked up the cake I had set aside and lit the candles. With the traffic and neon lights outside the window as my witnesses, I closed my eyes and whispered softly, Happy birthday, Serafina. The lawyer worked quickly. The next day, he delivered the divorce papers to my company. At that moment, Julian, who had been out all night, finally showed up. Unhurriedly, he pushed open the door to my office, strode over to me, and said in a humble tone, I'm sorry. Wife. I know you're upset. I was wrong yesterday. But Lenore only has me as a friend in this city. How could I just leave her hanging? It's just a birthday. I'll pretend I never saw what you said earlier. Let's keep going and have a good life together. I looked up at this man I had lived with for 3 years. The red marks on his neck were so glaring. A bitter smile appeared on my lips. Couldn't he even cover up the marks on his neck before coming to see me? This was nothing short of blatant provocation and betrayal. If that was the case, there was no need to keep Julian, this soiled man, in my life any longer. With that thought, I casually tossed the divorce papers on the coffee table in front of him. Let's get a divorce. Julian stood up in disbelief. When he saw the divorce papers, his brows furrowed tightly. Serafina, you're serious about this? Do you really have to be this ruthless? Why should I leave with nothing? We've been married for 3 years. I'm entitled to half of our marital property. I picked up a cup of steaming tea. Then, without a moment's hesitation, poured the boiling hot liquid straight at him. It hit its mark perfectly, drenching Julian's face in hot water. His rather handsome face was covered in tea leaves. It was almost comical. Julian was shocked by my sudden action. When he recovered, he snapped angrily, Serafina. Have you lost your mind? Yes, having fulfilled my obsession. I have. I retorted. I must have lost my mind to stay with someone like you for so long. You're nothing but a rotten cucumber. I must have been blind to like you all these years. Sneaking around with your mistress, who knows if you've caught some disease already. Last night, after I had someone investigate, I found out many things I had never known. When Julian told me he was going on a business trip out of town, he was actually traveling with Lenore. When he said he was working overtime for a meeting, he was actually checking into a hotel with Lenore. Even the frequent transactions in that bank account were transfers and red envelopes he'd sent to Lenore. Julian had been so sure I would never suspect him. If I hadn't accidentally seen Lenore's Moments post, if I hadn't noticed that 130 yuan transfer record, I would still be kept in the dark. Besides the fact that they'd been hooking up behind my back, the documents the secretary had sent also included details of their past. And Lenore? She was Julian's first love. If Julian's family hadn't been on the decline 3 years ago and in urgent need of an alliance with another family through marriage, I would have never ended up with him. I had thought it was a fated marriage. But it turned out to be a calculated choice based on pros and cons all along. After we got married, Julian had been cold to me. I knew that most couples in business marriages were distant and lacked affection. But I had naively wanted to be different. I had believed that I could eventually move Julian. But all I'd gotten in return was naked betrayal. Julian had just watched as I became more and more humble because of him. In his eyes, My efforts and sincerity must have seemed ridiculous. And in the end, Julian had even dared to arrange for his first love to work in his company, letting them spend every day together. Looking back at the strange expressions on Julian's parents' faces when they had accidentally run into Lenore, I suddenly realized they might have known about this all along. They had just pretended not to know to protect their son. After all, the Julian family still relied on the Serafina family to keep running. How ridiculous. 3 years of devotion had turned into a joke. Instead of continuing to waste my feelings on him, it was better to turn around and leave early. 3 Serafina. What nonsense are you talking about? Who have I been sneaking around with? Julian snapped at me angrily, then grabbed my hand tightly. The pain jolted my nerves, and I frowned. But when I looked at Julian, his eyes red with anger, I couldn't help but let out a sneer. Julian, do you take me for a fool? Stop yelling at me like this. Your Julian family still depends on me to support them. Please figure out your place. Julian finally felt a flicker of panic. He suddenly realized I wasn't just throwing a tantrum. Julian's face froze. He slowly let go of my hand and softened his tone. Serafina. But we've been married for so many years, can you really bear to leave me with nothing? His pitiful expression made me sick. I waved the hand to cut off his next words and spoke coldly. Julian, whatever lol sigh. You don't need to say anything more. Just sign the divorce agreement as soon as possible. I stepped back to put some distance between us and looked straight into his eyes. You know how much I loved you. How much I trusted you. But you never once kept me in your heart. Even though I was your wife. I let out a sigh as I spoke. So now, I don't want to keep chasing after you anymore. Weren't you tired of me? Well, now I'm willing to separate. I wish you and Lenore happiness. After I dropped those words, Julian's face turned even uglier. That's not true, he said, biting his lip and forcing out the words with obvious struggle. I shook my head, feeling even more disappointed. Julian really had no sense of responsibility at all. He wanted his first love to stay by his side. Yet he also couldn't bear to let go of the wealth I provided. Too greedy. I didn't want to deal with him anymore, I just wanted to leave. I had a meeting waiting for me in the afternoon, and no time to waste on him. But just as I reached the elevator, Julian caught up. He reached out to stop me. His voice sharp with anger. Serafina. Stop right there and listen to me explain. I looked at him coldly, curious to see what nonsense he could spout. He met my gaze, and his tone softened. Honey, I know I shouldn't have stood you up for Lenore. But after 3 years of marriage, can you really bear to leave me? If you truly didn't love me anymore, why would you still keep the paintings you drew for me in the room? And there were still tear stains on them from last night. As he said this, a faint look of pride crossed Julian's face. Hearing those words, my body froze suddenly. Even the air I breathed in from my chest felt cold. Julian had seen them. Last night, after I found evidence of Julian's betrayal, I'd cried ashamed as I was of it. I'd sat by the window, flipping through the fixed stack of portraits I'd drawn for him over the past 3 years. Every time I looked at one, tears would fall uncontrollably, dripping onto the paper and smudging the ink. But it wasn't because Julian had betrayed me. It was because I was grieving over the 3 years of sincere love I'd given him, only to have it trampled on like this. In those 3 years, I'd lost myself. I'd changed my personality to please Julian, pretending to be gentle and reasonable. My old friends had said to me, "You used to be a fearless troublemaker who didn't care about anything. How did you become like this?" Yeah. How had I ended up so heartbroken over a man who wasn't even worth it? I, Serafina, wasn't supposed to be like this. Seeing that I stayed silent and didn't refute him, Julian let out a sigh of relief. Then, let out a low sigh. Rarely. He took my hand. Honey, let's not get divorced, okay? Look how red your eyes are. Why don't we go back and rest properly? A light breeze drifted in through the window, brushing my face and pulling me back to my senses. My eyes were indeed a little so. Reed stayed up all night, and then gone to work early in the morning, straining my eyes too much. I pulled my hand out of Julian's grasp and blinked slowly. Julian, in 3 years of marriage, This is the first time you begged me to stay. The first time you've apologized to me. Do you know why? Deep down, you're just afraid that if we get divorced, your Julian family will never get those benefits again. Isn't that right? Julian fell silent suddenly, his gaze dropping to the ground. And the answer was obvious. Chapter 4. After that day, I never saw Julian again. I moved back to the old family house to live with my parents, and told them about my decision to get a divorce. They didn't say much when they heard. They usually never opposed my choices. Only Julian kept dragging his feet, refusing to agree to the divorce. I knew why. For the sake of his pride. He'd hated the idea of people calling him a kept man, so he'd voluntarily signed a prenuptial agreement before our marriage. The agreement stated that if we divorced, Julian would leave with nothing. Even so, Julian had taken plenty of advantages during our marriage. Once, I'd thought we were husband and wife, and that helping each other was only right. So I'd always introduced clients and resources to his Julian family. To put it bluntly, if it weren't for the Serafina family's influence, the Julian family would have gone bankrupt long ago. The dead weight in their company was all from the Julian family. They only cared about taking kickbacks. After marrying me, Julian often took my money to fill the holes in his company's finances. When I started preparing for the divorce, I did the math. Over the years, he'd taken tens of millions from my family. But once I decided to divorce, I canceled Julian's bank card and had someone spread the news that we were getting divorced. It was time to kick this parasite out. Anyway, having fulfilled one set, hadn't Julian told me not to mind his thing with Lenore? No. I thought so long as they didn't touch my money, I didn't mind anything. Before long, Julian stormed into my company. Furious. My secretary couldn't stop him. So she looked to me, asking what to do. I waved her out. Then turned to Julian. Did you sign the divorce agreement? Julian opened his mouth to speak, but my question left him tongue-tied. His face turned bright red. Serafina, do you really mean to divorce me? He snapped. Why did you poach all our clients? And why did you cancel my bank card? Do you know I was in the middle of paying for goods just now? How could you do this to me? He frowned, his face full of resentment. Hearing this, I couldn't help but laugh. Julian, what on earth are you talking about? I've already filed for divorce. It's a done deal. Why on earth would I keep giving you money? Besides, weren't all those clients introduced to you by me in the first place? You call that poaching? Do you have no shame when you talk? Moreover, you took my money to prop up your company, and your Julian family got all the profits. Where in the world is that fair? What? Did you really think I was just going to let you take advantage of me forever? I met his gaze calmly, my expression neutral. Julian stared at me for a long time, then suddenly softened his tone and apologized. Serafina, I know you only care this much because you love me. If you're willing to forgive me, I promise I'll stay with you properly from now on, never contact Lenore again. Okay? He looked at me, his eyes filled with hope. Julian wasn't stupid. As soon as those clients heard rumors that we were getting divorced, they immediately terminated their cooperation with him. He'd realized then that the Julian family really couldn't survive without the Serafina family. That was why he rushed over to apologize and make amends. But he wasn't truly sorry, he was just afraid of losing this comfortable life. I glanced at Lenore, who had followed him, then smiled at Julian. You say that? Aren't you afraid of making Lenore sad? After all, you've let her down twice now. Julian frowned, and Lenore walked in, her eyes red. As soon as she reached me, she bowed deeply and began apologizing. Serafina, Julian and I are completely innocent. The other day was my grandmother's death anniversary. He only stayed with me because he was worried I'd be sad. You're the only one in his heart. If you're angry, you can hit me or scold me, anything you want. It was a move of retreat to advance, and it only made Julian look more guilty. I picked up the teacup on my desk, took a slow sip, then smacked my lips and commented. Such a strong tea aroma. You knew about my relationship with Julian, yet you still did what you did. And now you expect me to forgive you too? I don't know where you get the nerve. Seeing that I wouldn't give in. Lenore suddenly rushed over and knelt at my feet. She grabbed my hand and began kowtowing heavily to the ground. Serafina, please forgive Julian. Please. The Julian family's company is his life's work. I watched coldly. If you want to kowtow, go do it outside. Don't dirty my office. With that, I picked up the phone and called security, telling them to throw these two shameless people out. As the security guards dragged Julian away, he waved his hands and shouted angrily. I'm Serafina's husband. How dare you treat me like this? Watch your jobs. Maybe he really hadn't expected me to treat him this way. Julian's face turned red as he yelled at me. Serafina, I'm telling you, if we really get divorced, you could get on your knees and beg me to come back, and I won't. His tone was firm, as if he was certain I was just throwing a tantrum and that, like before, I'd cave in and apologize to him in a few days. But even after he disappeared from my sight, I remained unmoved. It wasn't true that I wasn't sad. Who said the person being loved couldn't tell when someone was sincere? It was just that they enjoyed that feeling, being able to call you when they wanted, and dismiss you when they didn't. Chapter 5. When the weekend came, my parents, worried I might be upset, asked me to go home for dinner. Our family was happily making dumplings together when the 4 members of the Julian family showed up at the door. Julian was their eldest son. The Julian family also had a daughter named Lyra. Lyra had been spoiled since childhood and was arrogant by nature. After I married Julian, she'd always looked down on me and disliked me, calling me a flatterer who wasn't good enough for her brother. But Lyra loved a luxurious life. Whenever she ran out of money, she'd ask me for more. And whenever she got into trouble, which was often, she'd make me fix it. At the Julian family's house, she also often egged her parents on to give me a hard time. If it weren't for Julian's sake, I would have taught her a lesson long ago. But the thought that we'd be divorced soon and that I'd never have to deal with her again cheered me up a little. Still, when Julian's parents showed up, it was obvious, even without thinking what they wanted, they'd come to persuade us not to get divorced. When my parents saw them, their expressions dark and at the same time. What do you want? My father asked, speaking first. Julian's father rubbed his hands together, a smile spreading across his fleshy face. Don't be angry. In-laws. We've already given Julian a good scolding. How could he make such a nice girl like Serafina angry? As he spoke, he pushed a haggard-looking Julian in front of me, then smiled obsequiously. Serafina, be good. From now on, Julian will live a good life with you. You've been married for 3 years, can't you just talk this through nicely? It had been nearly a week since I'd told Julian I wanted a divorce. They hadn't come earlier because they'd thought I was just throwing a fit, and that there was no need to apologize. But now, I directly and neatly took back all the benefits that the Serafina family had given them. How could Julian's father, who was greedy for money, stand this? My mother couldn't help but sneer when she heard this. How dare you say such things? You know perfectly well what Julian did. Anyway, hadn't fulfilled wabsai. She hasn't liked being involved in our family's affairs all these years. We might as well part ways cleanly while we have the chance. Then my mother spoke again, her tone laced with sarcasm. After all, Julian's first love is with him all day long. Our Serafina should step aside and make room for her sooner. Seeing my mother get angry, Julian's mother quickly waved her hands to smooth things over. Oh, sister, you've got this all wrong. It was that woman who deliberately seduced my Julian. How could Julian ever like someone of that sort? Don't believe me, just listen to Julian explain. Julian's mother gave him a nudge, signaling him to step forward and apologize humbly. Upon hearing this, Julian walked up to me, his eyes filled with deep affection. Serafina, only during this time apart from you did I realize how much I can't bear to lose you. Forgive me, and we'll live a good life from now on. Aren't you the one who loves children the most? As soon as we make up, we'll start trying for a baby. We'll let our parents hold their grandson by next year. I promise. I'll do anything, as long as you don't divorce me. He hung his head, looking utterly humble. Even now, their whole family was still doing everything they could to leech off ours. But I was no longer the naive pushover I used to be. I wouldn't change my mind just because of a few sweet words from Julian. I shook my head and spoke without holding back. Julian, what? Nothing you do will work. We have to get a divorce. In this world, no one is indispensable to another. And no one will stay in the same place forever. Hearing my resolute words, Julian's face turned ugly. Serafina, how can you be so cruel? I just made a tiny mistake. Why do you have to hold on to it and not let go? He bit his lip, his eyes full of disappointment. Do you really want to divorce me that badly? Should I wait for you to weld a cuckold's hat onto my head? I retorted. Julian, sigh. You still want me to have your baby? Do you even deserve that? Besides, isn't there a woman out there who's already pregnant with your child? Julian's face instantly turned deathly pale. 6. As soon as I said those words, everyone present paled. Julian's mother looked at me with full suspicion. Serafina, you must have gotten this wrong. How could Julian ever cheat on you? Julian's father chimed in with a smile. But the smile didn't reach his eyes at all. That's right, Serafina. Don't make up lies to smear Julian just to get a divorce from him. Julian, however, was uncharacteristically flustered. He turned his gaze to me. His eyes filled with panic. Of course he probably never expected that I even knew about Lenore's pregnancy. Thinking this, I smiled and then said lightly, if we don't get divorced soon, Lenore's baby bump will be impossible to hide. Under the shocked stares of the others, I spoke with a smile. Your son got another woman pregnant outside. And now he still refuses to agree to a divorce. If your Julian family still wants to save some reputation in this circle, you'd better agree to the divorce as soon as possible. Otherwise, when Lenore's baby bump can't be hidden anymore, this scandal will become known to everyone. I heard your Julian family has been fighting for a cooperation project with the government lately. It wouldn't be good for a scandal to break out right now, would it? By this point, they clearly understood what I meant. The ruddy complexions of Julian's parents gradually faded to white. Hearing my words, Julian's father widened his eyes, stood up, and snapped angrily. Serafina, what do you mean by this? Are you threatening us? Julian's mother, realizing the situation, quickly chimed in. Serafina, you used to be so gentle and filial. Now you suddenly want to divorce my son. Did you find someone else outside? At this point, the Julian couple was determined to deny Julian's fault. Even if they knew there was a high chance Lenore's child was indeed their son's, they had to grit their teeth and hold their ground. Once this matter got out, the Julian family would truly lose both their reputation and their benefits. My parents looked at the couple at first. They were angry. But by the end of this farce, they'd grown numb. It turned out there really were people this shameless. Having navigated the business world for so many years, they could tell almost immediately from Julian's distracted look that something was amiss. Mr. and Mrs. Julian, sigh. You're humiliating my daughter right in front of us. Do you think we're dead? My mother said lazily, glancing at the people across from her with disdain. Our Serafina family isn't one that just anyone can latch onto for connections. If we hadn't thought your son was a decent person back then, we wouldn't have agreed to this marriage even if Serafina had wanted it. If you agree to the divorce now, we'll leave you a way out. Otherwise. As soon as these words were spoken, the Julian's faces fell completely. Julian's father, his face dark, said, Mrs. Serafina, are you saying you want to tear off all pretense? My father nodded. Don't think you can threaten us with reputation, it won't work. You're the ones begging now. Besides, everyone can see all the benefits your Julian family has gotten from us over the years. Agree to the divorce early, and we'll let bygones be bygones. The meaning behind my parents' words was crystal clear. The Julian family was on the decline. If they agreed to the divorce now, they could still get some benefits. But if they kept making a fuss, they'd end up with nothing. However, my father had clearly underestimated how greedy the Julians were. Seeing that his parents weren't getting any advantage, Lyra, who had been standing aside, suddenly jumped out, pointed at my nose, and yelled, Serafina, you ungrateful wretch. My brother has treated you so well all these years, how can you be so heartless? After saying this, Lyra swung her hand at me, trying to hit me. I smiled, twisted my body to dodge her attack, and then slapped her back twice. This Lyra had been acting like a tyrant for too long. She really thought I was someone easy to bully? Lyra never expected me to fight back so neatly. She covered her red, swollen cheeks and stared at me in disbelief. You dare hit me? I hit you, so what? Do I need a reason? After the farce ended, the 4 members of the Julian family were all thrown out by the security guards. One and all. And after weighing the pros and cons, Julian finally agreed to divorce me. But not long after, word got around that at the government's investment promotion meeting, the Julian family, who had been so confident of winning, lost the project to an unknown small company. As soon as this happened, everyone in the circle laughed at the Julian family. The Julian family had bet all their money on this project, thinking it was a sure win, and had made preparations well in advance. They'd been counting on this cooperation to stage a spectacular comeback, but instead, they suffered a total failure. The banks and private lenders they'd borrowed from began pressuring the Julian family to repay their debts, and clients started returning orders one after another. The Julian family panicked. Julian even rushed to find me, begging the Serafina family to save him. Lyra, who had always looked at me with cold contempt, suddenly lost her arrogance and addressed me obsequiously as sister-in-law. It was somewhat satisfying, but I still shook my head and refused. Why should I help you? Is there any profit in it for me? Sister-in-law, can't you do it for my brother? I know you're not a heartless person, Lyra urged anxiously. A smile curved up my lips. Who said I'm not heartless? Your brother cheated on me, and you still expect me to help your family? Have you forgotten all the trouble you stirred up between us over these 3 years? During the 3 years I was married to Julian, Lyra had been meddling in our marriage the entire time. She was without a doubt the most obnoxious sister-in-law ever. Lyra's face froze. Perhaps she remembered all the things she'd done, and her confidence gradually faded. But to hold on to her extravagant lifestyle, she still refused to give up. Sister-in-law, if you're willing to remarry my brother and promise to help our family, I swear I'll never throw an tantrum again. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Who had given Lyra the audacity to think I couldn't live without Julian? There were plenty of men in the world. Looking at the 2 of them, I felt a twinge of annoyance, and didn't want to keep entangling myself with them. Julian, if you and your sister don't leave right now, I guarantee the Julian family will end up in an even worse situation. 7. Perhaps my expression was too serious. Julian gave me a deep look, then turned to leave with his sister. But before they left, he stopped in his tracks. Serafina, do you really have to be this ruthless? I rubbed my temples. I've been so busy lately that I was already emotionally drained. And I really didn't have the energy to keep arguing with him. Security, see them out. Serafina, if you're not willing to help us, then don't blame me for being ruthless too. I looked up at Julian. The handsome face that had once made my heart flutter was now clouded with darkness, sending a chill down my spine. A few days later, a rumor suddenly spread online claiming that I had cheated. The accompanying photo showed me standing intimately with a man at the entrance of the obstetrics and gynecology department of a hospital. The implication was obvious. The Julian family immediately released a statement, saying that Julian and I had already divorced a little over half a month earlier. This made netizens believe that I had cheated, gotten pregnant by someone else, and then forced Julian to divorce me. In an instant, Julian became the poor husband sympathized with by the entire internet, while I became the target of everyone's anger. Moreover, since our Serafina family was a prominent wealthy household, once netizens dug up this detail, the Watch the Drama public went even more crazy. Next, my personal social media accounts and the company's official account were bombarded by netizens. One after another, every comment was an insult or a curse. Within a few days, the company's stock plummeted by tens of millions. When Lyra saw this, she sent me a message, brimming with pride. Serafina, now you're getting what you deserve. Who told you to hit me back then? Even if you kneel down and beg me someday, I won't even glance at you. Her tone was extremely arrogant. "Lyra, don't worry, that day will never come." After replying to her, I blocked Lyra. But the more they jumped around, the happier I was. Because those who harm others will eventually harm themselves. A few days later, my secretary told me that the Julian family had smudged my name again. This time, in their version of the story, I was the villain who had come between Julian and Lenore. In the video, Lenore accused me, claiming that I'd been captivated by Julian's looks and had deliberately ruined the Julian family to force them apart. She even said that to get a divorce from Julian, I'd schemed against both her and Julian to make him leave the marriage with nothing. Right after that, Julian released evidence that he'd left with nothing. As a result, I ended up trending again. A Julian family told their story with such vivid detail, while I never stepped forward to speak up. So most netizens believed the Julian family's version of events, branding me as a ruthless, vicious woman, one who coerced a good man, engaged in malicious competition, and tore apart a loving couple for 3 years. When my parents saw the long list of crimes netizens had accused me of, they couldn't help but laugh, then felt appalled by how absurd it all was. Did the Julian family really think we had no evidence? Soon after, someone anonymously reported the Serafina family for alleged contract fraud, tax evasion, and other offenses. Needless to say, it was definitely the Julian family's doing. When several senior executives at our company were taken away in front of everyone, panic spread among the staff. Employees worried that the online rumors might be true. Some resigned, while others stayed. However, only a small number left. Thanks to the company's generous treatment of employees over the years, most chose to believe the Serafina family was innocent. But netizens thought otherwise. They assumed the Serafina family was like grasshoppers in autumn, doomed to fail soon. Little did they know, I was about to show everyone what it meant to lift a stone only to drop it on one's own foot. Once public opinion had developed enough, I asked my secretary to release all the evidence on the company's official account. It included not only my chat records with Julian over the past 3 years, but also photos and videos of Julian and Lenore having an affair. Among them, I specifically marked the timeline of how Julian and I met and got married. I'd met him on a blind date 1 month after he'd broken up with Lenore. As for his parents' claim that I'd broken up their love, it was completely fabricated. Back then, I was abroad attending a conference, with both witnesses and evidence to prove it. How could I have destroyed their relationship? Immediately after, I relayed an official announcement from the Judicial Bureau. The Serafina family's enterprises had never engaged in tax evasion or malicious business competition. On the contrary, we proactively donated to charity every year to give back to the country. As for the investigation a while back, it had been triggered by a malicious report and the person responsible had already been fined. That person turned out to be Julian's cousin. Finally, having fulfilled my, there was the much talked about domestic violence incident. I released photos of Julian and Lenore going for a prenatal checkup together, along with her prenatal report. The report showed Lenore was for months pregnant at the time. But she hadn't even moved to this city yet. How could I have schemed against her and Julian? As for Julian leading with nothing, I directly posted the prenuptial agreement he'd signed. Should I really give him money after he cheated on me? And regarding the affair they accused me of having, that day, I'd been accompanying my cousin and his wife to their prenatal checkup. To slander me, the Julian family had deliberately blurred my cousin's face in the photos to mislead netizens. When all the evidence was laid out, netizens were stunned. They all commented, "So this is what it means to hold back a big move." Meanwhile, the Julian family was holding a wedding banquet for Julian and Lenore at a top-tier hotel. They'd invited dozens of media outlets to live stream the event and even arranged for product promotions to make a quick profit. After all, some netizens had been drawn to Julian and Lenore's looks and become their CP fans. But just as the Julian family thought they'd make a fortune, a flood of netizens rushed into the live stream and started yelling at them, "Lock this scumbag and Chi-Chi together, don't let them harm anyone else. You still want to sell products? Only fools would buy from you. The Julian family is just no good, their bosses are all trash." The staff panicked and hurried to find Mr. and Mrs. Julian, as well as Lyra. CEO Julian. So many netizens are coming into the live stream to insult us. Lyra brushed it off. That's just how the internet is. Having haters means you're popular. Stop overreacting. But when she checked her phone, she panicked. Her social media accounts, which she usually used to show off, had also become targets of public outrage. This was karma. Heaven spare no one. At that moment, the door to the wedding venue suddenly opened. Several police officers walked in, showed their credentials, and took Lyra away. We have reason to believe Lyra is involved in defamation, rumor-mongering, and accidental homicide. On stage, Lenore slowly broke into a smile. Thanks to the Julian family's grand publicity, dozens of cameras at the banquet had clearly captured this scene. In an instant, it sparked heated discussions among countless people. Julian and Lenore's CP was dragged through the mud. Those who had worshipped them now felt disgusted by them. People had thought it was a pure love story, but it turned out to be just Julian and Lenore's scheme. When netizens realized they'd misunderstood me, they stood up for me. Some even took it further, tracking down the Julian family and demanding they leave the country. Such scumbags don't deserve to set foot on Chinese soil. Seeing netizens turn to my side, I struck while the iron was hot and launched a new product. With so many people following the drama, demand quickly outstripped supply. This time, it was the Serafina family that made a fortune. Soon after, Lyra's verdict came down. She had indeed been involved in a fatal incident, but it had happened 3 years earlier. Due to the high public attention on the case, the police released a detailed announcement. What came as a surprise, though, was that the person Lyra had killed was Lenore's elderly grandmother. The entire internet was shocked. What kind of twist was this? It had started as a wealthy family feud, but now it was tied to Lenore too. Before long, Lenore, one of the key figures, stepped forward to tell her story. The girl was an abandoned baby, adopted by her grandmother after being found. Though her grandmother wasn't wealthy, she treated the girl with the utmost love, working hard to send her to school. The girl didn't let her grandmother down. She got into a top university. There, she studied hard and strived for success, hoping to repay her grandmother one day. But later, she fell in love with a boy from a wealthy family. He told her he wanted no one but her. However, just before graduation, the boy's family ran into trouble, and his relatives ordered him to return home for an arranged marriage. The boy refused and confessed his relationship with the girl. But the boy's younger sister thought the girl was deliberately clinging to her brother. To teach the couple a lesson, she hired people to beat up the girl's grandmother. Tragically, the grandmother had a heart attack and passed away. The girl was devastated. Yet her boyfriend, who knew the truth, ignored her pleas, returned to his city, and married a wealthy woman, living a comfortable life. Now, everyone understood. Lenore had deliberately stirred up trouble to avenge her grandmother. Netizens had mixed feelings, but no one could bring themselves to hurl abuse at Lenore anymore. The next day, Lenore asked to meet me. I sat down across from her, stirred my coffee, and said nothing. She gave me a gentle smile, then apologized. I'm sorry, Serafina. I'm truly sorry for destroying your family. I know saying this won't make up for it, but I couldn't bring myself to let it go. I understand how much this has hurt you. I smiled and replied, it's okay. At the very least, I wouldn't have gotten all that evidence so easily without you. Yes, much of the evidence of Julian's infidelity had come from Lenore. In fact, not long after I'd asked Julian for a divorce, Lenore had secretly met with me. She'd told me why she wanted revenge and confessed that the Julian family had planned to climb the social ladder by stepping on the Serafina family. She'd advised me Julian wasn't a good man. He'd done many bad things just for money. I also learned that Lenore had deliberately shown me that moment's boast. What are your plans for the future? I asked her. Lenore shook her head and looked out the window. I don't know for sure, but I'll probably go back to the town, get a job as a teacher, and live an ordinary life for the rest of my days. That's what my grandme always hoped for me. What about the Julian family? Then? Have you let go of your hatred? Lenore lowered her head and said calmly, Their family is on the brink of bankruptcy now. And I've already sent Lyra to the hospital. As for Julian, he's not worthy of my love. At that moment, a man suddenly rushed over from behind. It was Julian. He took off his mask. His eyes red as he looked at us. Then grabbed Lenore tightly by the arm. Lenore, you planned all of this, didn't you? Why would you do this to me? Why? His face was deathly pale. And he looked haggard. Of course he did over the past few days. The Julian family had become the target of public outrage. And Julian himself had been tormented by online criticism. Unable to sleep at night. Lenore's expression darkened. She pushed him away forcefully. Julian, does that mean my grandma deserved to die? Every time I close my eyes at night, I can't stop seeing the image of her lying on the ground. Lifeless. Julian, instead of questioning me, you should think hard about what you've done yourself. Tears streamed down Julian's face. But I really do love you. I betrayed Serafina for you, isn't that enough? Just then, let out a low sigh. Julian's gaze suddenly fell on Lenore's flat stomach. Where's the baby? Chapter 11. Lenore couldn't hold back a scoff. Do you think you're worthy of me having your child? Let me tell you, I was never pregnant in the first place. Besides, do you even love me? What you feel is just guilt. You know my grandma was killed by your sister, but you chose to cover for her. Back then, I begged you to testify for me. What did you do? You told me to let it go. Then threw 100 yuan at me and called it compensation. Is my grandma's life only worth 100 yuan? By this point, Lenore's eyes were already red with anger. She grabbed a bank card and slammed it hard against Julian's face. There's your 100 yuan. From now on, we owe each other nothing. After saying that, Lenore said goodbye to me and turned to leave. I stood up, ready to go. Had seen enough of the drama and it was time to leave. But unexpectedly, Julian grabbed my hand and looked at me pitifully. Serafina, you're all I have left. Can you please not leave me? Confusion filled my mind. What does he mean by all I have left? I gently pulled my hand out of his grasp, speaking slowly and softly. Oh, right. I forgot to tell you, the company that snatched your project is mine. I did it on purpose. To get back at you all. I gave him a playful smile. While Julian's face turned as white as a sheet, I was more than satisfied with his end. Those who betray sincere feelings are doomed to be betrayed themselves. It wasn't until I got in touch with Lenore that I found out their affair hadn't just started a few months earlier. As far back as 2 years ago, Julian had gone to another city to find Lenore. At that time, Lenore had almost managed to let go of her past grievances. But Julian had resorted to both threats and bribes to force her to be with him. As for that project with the government, it was a trap I'd set for the Julian family. Over the years, Julian had taken advantage of my trust to plant someone in my company as an insider. The frequent problems with our company's collaborations recently? That was all Julian's doing. His goal was to let the Julian family replace the Serafina family and become the richest family in the city. After joining forces with Lenore, I had her deliberately led Julian into competing for that government project, setting him up to fail miserably. This was just karma. Later, the Julian family went bankrupt. Julian's parents took him and moved to an old residential community, but they were soon recognized. Every day, people pointed at their backs and cursed them. Julian's father couldn't bear the fall from grace. He drank heavily every day and beat his wife whenever he was in a bad mood. 8 years later, Lyra was released from prison. Julian's mother then took all her anger out on her daughter, calling Lyra a useless burden who only wasted money. As for Julian, he spent his days daydreaming about making a comeback. After piling up a mountain of debt, he ran away. The creditors couldn't find him, so they turned to his parents to pay off his debts. And so, the Julian family's living hell officially began. To pay off their son's debts, one went to work as a construction laborer, while the other took a job as a maid. Once living in luxury, they now led a miserable, chaotic life. As for Lyra, unwilling to endure hard work, she became a servant for someone else, fallen completely from her former status. Kale, my childhood sweetheart, Made a grand declaration of love announcing to all our friends that he would be getting married in 2 months. But the bride wasn't me. When I heard the news, I rushed to the party. Through the crack in the door, I heard one of his friends ask, "What about Eloan?" He casually crushed his cigarette and said, "Her? She's just a clingy dog. Who cares anyway?" The word stabbed straight into my heart, spreading a sour ache from my chest to my fingertips. Cale and I had been together since elementary school. He used to treat me so well. When we were little, we were both poor. He hadn't yet been brought back to his wealthy family. I was the unwanted daughter in a household that favored sons, often going hungry. He'd secretly slip his food ration tickets into my hand, pretending it was nothing. Later, my mother refused to pay my tuition. She even planned to sell me off for a dowry. In desperation, Cale went to a construction site to carry cement. It was the dead of winter. His hands turned purple and raw. When my tears fell onto his frozen skin, I couldn't stop crying. He gently patted my back and said with his soft, trembling voice, "Eloan, I'll protect you." His teenage promise burned bright, warming my entire youth. Now, just a wall apart, he openly declared to everyone that I was nothing more than a pathetic hanger-on, not even an ambiguous crush. Not even a friend. Cale at 26 was no longer the boy I once knew. When he was found and taken back by his family at 18, the first thing he did was rescue me from that hellish home. The young man, wearing the patched-up clothes I had sewn, kicked over the icy water bucket. It was the dead of winter, and I was doing laundry for a family. My thin coat soaked through. "Eloan, I'm here," he said breathlessly. "You'll never have to do this kind of work again." We both laughed through tears in that half-collapsed, garbage-strewn house. He begged his biological parents to take me out of the mountains under the guise of charity. As I left that cage behind, he swore, "Eloan, I'll always treat you well." When I pushed open the door to the present party, every friend's eyes instinctively turned toward Cale. He didn't even look up. The girl beside him, however, looked at me with innocent curiosity and asked, "Who's that, honey?" "His fiancé. Just a college friend," Cale said softly, his voice gentle as though afraid to startle her. "Leora, are you bored? Want to take a walk?" On the plate before her were little fruit pieces from the cake. Cale's old habit. Back when he still cared about me, he would always cut the fruit from his cake and place it on mine. A friend once teased him about his favoritism. Cale had only smiled and said, "I admit I'm biased. Maybe it's selfish. But in my memories, kids always like the fruit best. I guess Eloan does too." That small privilege no longer belonged to me. I forced down the lump in my throat and reached out to stop him. "Cale, we need to talk." His fiancé's eyes widened, darting nervously between us. "What's there to talk about?" Cale's face hardened. He patted the girl's shoulder reassuringly. My heart grew cold. I fought to keep my voice steady. "Just a few minutes. After this, I'll never appear in front of you again." There was a time when things were good between us. At 18, newly returned to the Cale family, he refused to obey his parents. He only listened to me. He was like a stubborn calf, putting the reins in my hands. I tutored him in his studies. The lamp in the study was bright, but not as bright as his eyes. "Eloan, I've decided," he said, lifting his test paper, his score having risen by 300 ranks. "I'll study hard, make a fortune, and take care of you forever." His uncle and aunt once warned me privately about the dangers of young love. But in truth, Cale and I had never crossed that line. We were just tenderly close. In high school, we were too busy to think of anything else. I always thought once we get into college, things will be easier. As long as two hearts are together, no distance can tear them apart. But somewhere along the way, we drifted apart. By senior year, Cale had new friends once who liked to take risks. I scolded him once too often, and he snapped, "Eloan, Eden Fosilmide sir. You're meddling too much. Who do you think you are?" After that, we never walked home together again. Years of childhood bond shattered overnight. I tried to make things right, but mutual friends pulled me aside. "Cale's got someone new," Stop hovering, it annoys him. He hates that you keep trying to control him. But wasn't that what he'd asked me for? When we first started college, I was busy with activities for a few days. Cale had come to find me. His eyes pitiful. Eloan. Please don't stop looking after me. You didn't even scold me for skipping class. That night, I promised myself I'd always make time for him, to watch over him. Protect him from those wildflares he'd always attract. We argued countless times, but always made up. Until this time we truly broke. Cale surrounded himself with new people. At first, I thought it was a passing phase. I'd been chasing him openly for years. How could our story just end like this? Eventually, he gave in, not out of love, but to avoid public drama. His fiancée was easily embarrassed. After all, he sent her home, making me wait 3 whole hours before finally showing up. I saw the hickey on his neck and realized how much he'd changed. He sat across from me, impatient. What do you want? Carefully, I took out a small note, an old reconciliation coupon he'd written when we were 18, and handed it to him. Can we make up? He looked at it blankly, then tossed it into the trash. What's this crap? You really came here to show me garbage? My time's valuable. Then he added coldly, I'm getting married. Stop clinging to me. If you think you owe me, just pay back the money my parents gave you. Then we're even. His phone rang. He stepped over the crumpled note and left without another word, throwing me one last warning glance. I watched his figure grow smaller, my tears falling before I could stop them. Promises made in love only hold power in the moment they're spoken. In my mind, his 18-year-old voice still sang softly by my ear. In this vast world, how lucky we are to meet must be fate. Must be destiny. Eloan. Believe me or not, it must be destiny that brought us together. I'll love only you. Forever. In his eyes then, I saw a reflection of myself, small, radiant, and the only one. That boy, that vow, had once felt so very real. For over 20 years, I had foolishly believed. Only to have Cale, at 26, tear it all down, telling me that everything had been a lie. All the love, every bit of it was fake. I went back home. After graduating from university, I had already moved out of Cale's house. But over the years, in hopes of seeing him more often, I moved back. I pushed open the door to find my uncle and aunt sitting in the living room. They greeted me warmly, asking about my well-being. Finally, having fulfilled my aunt hesitated before asking, has Cale not come back with Eloan? Has he not changed his mind? They had seen Cale's feelings for me over the years. Initially, having fulfilled my obsession, they had their doubts about me. But through these years, my own capabilities had won them over. I shook my head, forcing a smile. Aunt, I think it's over between him and me. The next day, I moved out of the home that had once given me warmth. I crossed paths with Cale, who was walking in with his fiancée. He glanced at me and muttered, you should have moved out long ago. My best friend Jessa took me in. She was worried about my condition, knowing all too well about the things Cale and I had gone through. It's hard to get back on track when you've fallen from a place of love. She had seen me throw everything aside late at night just to answer Cale's call, rushing out to pick him up from the street while he was drunk, never questioning, never hesitating. She had seen Cale's ever-changing lovers, none of them ever holding a place for me. She heard him say he didn't like my type. I tried so hard to change my appearance, my style, but it never worked. When I loved him the most, I didn't care about my pride anymore. She had warned me. She said, stop being foolish. Eloan. With Cale being like this, how could he possibly love you? Sometimes I even wondered if Cale had somehow lost himself, as if his soul had been replaced by someone else. After escaping from a family that valued sons over daughters, I knew better than anyone that a girl must love herself. But this was Cale. The Cale who had loved me since we were children. He was the Cale who cared for me when I was sick, never leaving my side. The Cale with a heart that burned with the passion of youth. Jessa sighed, and a cup of warm water appeared before me. Are you okay? I nodded. Maybe after all this time, The pain in my heart had dulled. I said, I'm going to Tibet. I'll leave tomorrow. I had wanted to go in my sophomore year. But by then, Cale had stopped being patient when he listened to me. I had once shown him pictures of Tibet's landscapes online, eagerly saying, let's go, Cale. I've never seen the snow mountains or tried mountain climbing. Fine, Lunella low sigh. Fine, Cale had said distractedly, answering a phone call, then going off to have fun with someone else. Over the years, every time I brought it up, he always found an excuse to shut me down. What's so good about going there? I'm busy playing games with my friends. No time. His expression was impatient, and he pushed me away without a second glance. There were always excuses when it came to not loving someone. But before, my feelings had always been the most important. Jessa stared at me for a moment, as though seeing me for the first time. After a long pause, she nodded. All right. I'll go with you. Is your work not busy anymore? I've taken a long leave. After I come back, I won't be here anymore. I turned the prayer beads on my wrist. They had been a gift from Cale when I was 18. Given to ensure my safety in a temple. All these years, the string had snapped and been replaced, but the beads had become smoother with time. You should have left long ago. With your talent, you should have been managing a branch by now, Jessa said happily. I'll go with you. I stared at the handwritten reconciliation voucher and tore it up, throwing it into the trash. Okay, I said softly. I didn't attend Cale's wedding. I gave the wedding gift money to my aunt. While Cale was busy preparing for his engagement party, I finally saw the snow I had dreamed of, my face red from the cold, during his engagement vows. I, with the tour guide's help, had climbed to the highest peak in the world. The endless white snow surrounded me. Because of the lack of oxygen at such high altitudes, many people had to give up halfway. Jessa and I supported each other as we climbed slowly. In the beginning, I struggled to adjust to the oxygen and deprived state, nearly fainting on the way. It was the guide and Jessa who encouraged me. Girl, having fulfilled my obsession. You can do it. Once you get over this, life will be smooth sailing. Girl, you're not alone. Look, your friend is climbing with you. I looked at Jessa. Her face was a little bruised from the cold, but she was still holding my hand, pulling me upwards. In that moment, I had one thought: I would make it to the top. At the peak, the peak. At that moment, as the sunlight broke through the clouds, the pilgrims clasped their hands together. My prayer beads snapped off my wrist. I almost lost my life in Tibet. The soft snow was now as sharp as a blade. Some of the climbers, upon reaching the summit, started crying. Mom, can you see it? I saw the golden mountain. I'll never have nightmares again. A little girl who had been molested as a child cried as she called her mother. Others shouted, life is a vast wilderness. I will take control of my own life. Jessa and I watched them argue, sharing a smile. I didn't even notice the beads rolling away. As we descended the mountain, Jessa asked, really not going to pick them up? I shook my head. The heartache of a young girl was buried in the sharp white snow of Tibet. I had cast off everything that bound me. From now on, I would never love Cale again. At that moment, Cale stood at his engagement ceremony, making a lifetime vow, exchanging rings. He subconsciously looked at the empty seat his mother had left behind, and a pair of shy eyes suddenly flashed through his mind. Past events are often given meaning when we look back on them. He stared at his sweet Fiang key, suddenly feeling regretful. He thought, I could have waited a few more years to get engaged. I could have played around for a couple more years. After returning from Tibet, I got my life back on track. When my aunt heard the news about my transfer, she was happy for me for a long time. I know how capable my Eloan is. The previous company didn't use her talents properly. When you come back, remember to stop by. I'll make you something nice. I smiled and chatted with my aunt for a while before quickly heading to work. Before I hung up, my aunt added, Eloan, I told you wrong before. Cale isn't getting married. He's getting engaged. I must have heard wrong. I was so scared. He was just talking to the young girl for a few months. and suddenly he wanted to marry her. Fortunately, haven't fulfilled my ibsa. It's just an engagement. We still have time to plan the wedding. So it was just an engagement. Not a marriage. But so what? I replied briefly. Hung up the phone. And when I finished work, my boss was waiting for me not far away, asking if I was free for dinner. Jessa slyly winked at me and pushed me toward my boss. She's definitely free. I heard a new Western restaurant has opened. Do you want to go? My boss Thorne asked with a gentle smile, quietly waiting for my response. Jessa had already disappeared in a flash. I was feeling a bit hungry, and this seemed like a good chance to explain things to him. So I agreed. The restaurant had a great atmosphere, and Thorne was a perfect gentleman. I hesitated before telling him about my past. The wound was ripped open once more, and the bloody reality lay before me. The restaurant's music was soft, and after a conversation, a glass of warm water appeared before me. It's all in the past, he said. You're very brave. The man's voice was gentle. It's fine. I can wait for you. Thorne suddenly spoke up. Eloan. You might not remember me, but we worked together on a project 2 years ago. There were some unexpected events, but you handled them very decisively, he added, his earlobe turning slightly red. I was attracted to you the first time I met you. You've always been like a shining pearl. Your emotional experiences are a part of your growth, and they shaped who you are today. Thorne smiled at me, his gaze soft. And you must be quite pleased with yourself. Right? Of course. The road I've walked has been full of bumps. Again and again. The world knocked me down. And I kept getting back up. Love can't feed you. And my feelings for Cale couldn't stop me from advancing in my career. But I found it hard to leave. And that's why my career stagnated. I understood clearly now that only I could save myself from the fire. Over and over again. I nodded at his smile. I should apologize first. Eloan, he said. After I developed feelings for you, it took me 2 years to come to you. I wasn't capable enough. But at least I made it in the end. I hope my pursuit hasn't caused you any trouble. If it has, I'll correct it. Please give me a chance. Eloan. The man in front of me was sharp-eyed, a natural-born leader. His family owned numerous businesses, and he had risen from the bottom, gradually earning the respect of the company's employees. But when he looked at me, his eyes always carried a smile, as though just seeing me made him happy. I finally nodded. I was giving myself a chance too, hoping that I would never lose the courage to love again. Meeting Cale again was an unexpected surprise. There were a few mutual friends who had genuinely cared about me. As summer approached, they tried to meet up frequently, but I just couldn't find the time. As summer neared, after finishing a major project, I happily invited Thorne out for dinner. He took care of me in every possible way, and our relationship blossomed during this time. When we arrived at the restaurant, I saw Cale, looking grim and intimidating. He seemed to have rushed over. His dark hair was damp with sweat at the forehead. It had been so long since I last saw him that I didn't even recognize him at first. How strange once. I could recognize him from just his back. He was so different now. Eloan. You're actually with another man behind my back? Anger flickered in his eyes. I didn't understand. He had already become someone else's husband. Yet here he was, standing before me with a hurt expression. It just didn't make sense. Cale reached out, seemingly to grab me. Clearly. The person you've always liked is me. His voice was hoarse, and his eyes were red. That was the old me, I said firmly. Now, I don't like you anymore. Thorne stepped in front of me. His usually gentle expression now teemed with a hint of danger. Sir. She doesn't want you near her. Cale sneered. What are you going to do about it? You'd better step aside. She and I don't need your input. I pressed my lips together in a subtle show of displeasure, and Thorne's tone remained calm, like he was speaking to a child. Didn't I warn you last time? Don't show up around her again. The next second, Thorne's bodyguards appeared in the restaurant, one of them kicking Cale hard in the chest, sending him crashing to the ground. You've lost your mind, Cale grumbled, still unwilling to back down. Thorne gave him a quick glance, His voice still smooth and unhurried, radiating the disdain of someone at the top. I almost felt like Thorn was looking at Cale the way one might look at an ant. The sharp edge he had once carefully concealed before me was now exposed. Eloan said she doesn't like you. I hope you'll take the hint. After all. Here. You're not a prince. Without waiting for Cale's reply, Thorn took my hand and led me out of the restaurant. The sounds of Cale's protests followed us. Faint but insistent. Don't get too smug. She used to love me. There's no way she can just stop liking me like that. You kept trying to block me. I didn't think much of his words. But Thorn was unusually quiet as we got back to the car, looking like he wanted to say something but hesitated. My mood had been ruined, and I no longer had the energy for any conversation. Normally, having fulfilled my assertion, we would talk about company matters or share funny stories from school, but Thorn remained silent. After a moment, I was about to speak up when he beat me to it. Eloan. His voice was warm, though there was a hint of unease. The driver stopped by the lakeside. Shall we take a walk? I nodded, agreeing. We strolled by the lake, the last rays of the sunset bathing us in golden light. It was beautiful beyond words. Thorn confessed some things to me, like how Cale had come here 3 months ago, trying to find me, or how Cale had broken off his engagement, and his family had to pay a large sum in compensation to the bride's family. He also shared how he had secretly been watching over me, afraid Cale might do something reckless, worried for my safety. He spoke slowly, but with urgency, and I could sense his protective nature. It was clear that his intentions were partly for my well-being, but there was also a personal desire mixed in. I know. I replied calmly, buying some skewers along the way and offering him some. The heavy atmosphere lifted as the smell of spicy skewers filled the air. My aunt had already called me about Cale's wedding, and I couldn't understand why he'd suddenly broken off the engagement. I had an inkling about some of the things Cale had been doing recently. Thorn had increased my security, something I was aware of. He had always escorted me home, and I noticed there were initially 2 people following us. But now there were 6 or 7. How could I not notice? I had perfect vision. After all, I knew about the small, harmless things he did behind the scenes to protect me. Even though they might have a selfish side, it was all normal. I said. Cale's changed. But I don't want him. I took a bite of a skewer. He never valued my love before. And now he's shamelessly crawling back. How disgusting. I added. Thorn seemed surprised by my reaction. He paused for a moment but quickly recovered. He took the trash from my hand and threw it in the bin. His thoughtful care for me in these days had not escaped my notice. I always thought the story would end tragically, but in truth, the next page held happiness. I wasn't someone who thrived on suffering, and I couldn't forgive the pain Cale had caused me. That trip to Tibet, in the midst of a snowstorm, I buried this unforgettable love with my own hands. Things were far from over. After the restaurant, he clung to me, his hair styled with too much effort. He wasn't the 18-year-old boy anymore. Cale's air of commerce was impossible to disguise. Compared to him, Thorn outshone him in every possible way. After work, I walked along the familiar road home, unsurprised to find Cale waiting for me, a bouquet of roses in his hands. He strode toward me with the same self-assured confidence as always. Eloan, these are for you, he said. Hope you're happy every day. This time, I didn't ignore him as I used to, nor did I let Thorn walk me home. I brushed aside the flowers Cale tried to press into my hands and said quietly, Cale, we need to talk. His smile widened instantly, the same practiced warmth returning to his face. Eloan, you've forgiven me, haven't you? I knew you couldn't really forget me. You didn't mean what you said before. I kept walking. When we reached a CAF by the road, I ordered coffee, then cut him off just as he was about to start reminiscing. Cale, I said, I don't love you anymore. The curve of his lips froze, and for a moment his whole expression seemed to harden into disbelief. After a long silence, he finally asked, why? Through the thin veil of steam rising from my cup, I met his eyes and said, because loving you is exhausting. Cale, I don't even know when it started. But somewhere along the way, you stopped caring about what I felt or liked. At dinners, there was never anything I could eat. Our friends would make fun of me and force me to drink, and you'd just sit there, pretending not to hear. I'm allergic to seafood. But because you liked it and wouldn't touch it unless I prepared it, I always cleaned and shelled it for you. Only when I set it in front of you would you eat. You trampled on my sincerity again and again. I know why you changed. Kale's eyes flickered guiltily. He couldn't meet my gaze. Because that miserable time in your life, those humiliating years, you see them as your shame. And I was the witness. You can't bear to face me because I remind you of it. I spoke calmly, even as the words sliced through the air. You don't want to admit you'd become vain. So you pushed me away. You wanted to prove to everyone that you belonged in a different circle, that you were no longer like me. I didn't understand at first. I sighed, until Jessa pointed it out. But even then, Kale. My voice trembled. I loved you. I loved you so much I lost myself. When news of your engagement came, that was when I finally woke up. I even overheard how you described me. You called me a clingy fool. Loving the wrong person makes you cry until you have no tears left. That's why I've decided to learn to love myself instead. Kale. Don't you understand? We can never go back. The words struck him like nails driven into the floor. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. His eyes reddened. He knew me too well, knew that once I made a decision, I never looked back. Don't come looking for me again, I said, rising to leave. But before I could move, his hand shot out, blocking my way. Eloan. I was wrong. Kale's voice trembled. I was selfish before. But I'll change. Please. Just give me another chance. He reached for my hand. Desperate. I was a bastard then. I know. I don't even know why I hurt you like that. Kale must have truly panicked, because right there in the crowded CAF, he tried to grab me. Then, let out a low sigh. Suddenly, a firm grip pulled me back. Thorn appeared behind me, his voice steady but cold. He had booked the entire place. People quietly began to clear out. Kale. Thorn said. You might want to mind your image. Eloan still cares about hers. Even if you don't. Seeing Thorn, Kale's composure shattered again. This is between me and Eloan. Who do you think you are to interfere? Thorn met his glare head on. His voice cutting and deliberate. I'm someone more capable than you. Someone who outranks you in this district. I stepped forward and said softly. Just go. Kale. There's nothing left for us to say. He stood there for a moment, then turned sharply on his heel. The door slammed shut behind him. After that day, I didn't see Kale again. Thorn, however, began pursuing me with growing intensity. Jessa often urged me to go out more. That trip to Tibet had changed me. And she was clearly intent on bringing Thorn and me closer. During our travels, I discovered that Thorn, the man who had probably never boiled water before, was surprisingly meticulous. He planned every route, knew where the best photos could be taken, where the local dishes were worth trying. We met an older woman traveling alone, struggling on a steep trail. Thorn immediately went to help her. Ma'am, are you here for the scenery too? I'm an amateur photographer, let me take a few pictures for you. No charge. I promise. Just for practice. At first, she eyed us warily. But Thorn was warm. Genuine, impossible not to like. She ended up joining us for You've got me now. I know you're afraid people will change. That love can fade. But remember what that woman said back there after everything she went through. She still believes in love. She's still in love with life. He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from my face. Don't be afraid. I'm here. My nose stung. Tears threatening to spill. Later, after another business trip, after we'd closed a major deal together, he handed me a handwritten letter on the drive back. It was pages long. His handwriting neat and careful. At the end, one simple line read, Eloan, will you be my girlfriend? Beneath it, a little doodle of a puppy pleading. You can say no. I couldn't help but laugh. Jessa rushed over, thinking something had happened, and only to realize her chronically unlucky friend had finally found her spring. I thought, Maybe I do have the courage to love again. This time, the man before me was steady, grounded, someone who made me feel safe. So I wrote him back, carefully, sincerely, I'm willing to be your girlfriend. To begin a new and sweet chapter of love. Thorn never forgot a single holiday after that. Every celebration came with a thoughtful gift, something he'd noticed I wanted or needed long before I ever said it aloud. He was always respectful of my opinions. And each surprise he prepared ensured I had nothing to be dissatisfied with. The vase in the office was always filled with fresh flowers every day. And if we were busy, they'd be replaced before they had time to wilt. During the company's annual leave, he took me to France, where we visited the romantic Eiffel Tower. He took countless photos of me, and one of our pictures together was always kept on the back of his phone case. We never argued, and he was almost flawless in everything he did. If it weren't for certain people I disliked, I would probably have been happy the whole time before heading home. Just as I was planning to bring him home to meet my aunt and uncle, my aunt suddenly called me. "Eloan, I heard you're coming home. And Cale just came back too. He's at the house." I froze. It had been a long time since we last spoke. Ever since that unpleasant incident. Coincidentally, heading fulfilled my sigh. We had just reached the doorstep. I saw Cale waiting at the door, and as soon as he noticed me, he started to grab my luggage. But when he saw our hands intertwined, his eyes instantly turned bloodshot with anger. My aunt had prepared a lot of dishes. And since my promotion, I hadn't been home in over 6 months. My uncle, who rarely smiled, was now grinning, and my aunt held my hand, asking how I was. Cale stood to the side, cold and silent, saying nothing. When my aunt asked about Thorn, Cale interrupted before he could speak. "How reliable is he? Really? And you're bringing him home? And how long have you two been together?" The atmosphere immediately grew tense. It was Thorn who broke the silence. Smiling slightly, "I believe Lo trusts me. Which is why she's doing this. And we've known each other for a long time. We've been together for half a year now." As he pushed the gift he had brought toward my aunt, he turned to Cale with a smile. "Lo specifically asked me to bring some Bao Chun tea for my uncle. She said you really like it. Would you like to try some?" My uncle chatted with us about daily life. His face filled with warmth as he recounted stories from our trip and events at the company. Most of it was about me, which made my aunt and uncle laugh so hard their eyes were squinted. Only Cale stood there, his face dark and unyielding, staring at Thorn. Thorn, instinctively holding my hand, subtly closed the distance between us, even meeting Cale's gaze. At one point, my aunt and uncle left for a moment, and Thorn leaned into my shoulder, silently asserting his claim. He whispered harmless little words into my ear. "I feel like your childhood friend is about to kill me with his eyes." He sounded pitiful, and I squeezed his hand in return. "You're seeing things. Don't look at him. Look at me." Under Cale's hateful glare, I kissed Thorn's cheek. "Be good. Don't cause trouble. We still have to drive home. So save some energy." As I finished, Cale could hardly contain himself, standing up and leaving his seat in frustration. He didn't appear again for the rest of the family dinner. My aunt was very pleased with Thorn. And before we left, she even subtly asked if I was thinking about marriage. I told her it was too early. I didn't expect Thorn to remain so quiet on the drive back. Normally, he would chat with me. But now he hadn't said a word. My intuition told me something was off. Eventually, having fulfilled my sigh, he could no longer hold it in. "You're not thinking about getting back with him, are you? After everything he's done?" I replied immediately. "Of course not." Thorn had been particularly clingy these days. But he didn't throw a tantrum. He just muttered, "I trust you." But there was still a trace of unease in his eyes. I thought Cale would leave me alone after that. But the next day, I received a call from a tired-sounding woman. "Are you Loan? Do you have time? Can we meet?" When I arrived at the CAF where we were supposed to meet, I saw a worn-out Leora, the girl Cale had broken off his engagement with. She looked terrible, forcing a smile at me. "You're so different from before," she remarked. Jessa had said something similar. Thorn had nurtured me like a flower, and now it had bloomed brightly. Love was like tending a garden. After a while, Cale rushed in, and as soon as Leora saw him, her eyes turned red. The man before her had betrayed her love, turning the long-awaited relationship into a cruel joke. They argued for a long time. Leora even threatened to take her life. But Cale didn't care at all. This time, she had texted Cale in advance, saying she planned to make things difficult for me. In less than 10 minutes, Cale ran several red lights to get here. I sighed. Women could do incredibly foolish things in the name of love. It's not too late. Leora. Love yourself first. Leora slapped Cale across the face. The naive girl still had scars on her wrist. Scars that had only recently healed. She cried as she confronted him. Where is the man who once loved me? Cale. You're no longer who you used to be. Can't you wake up? Cale ignored her, his eyes fixed firmly on me. Leora finally gave up. She wiped away her tears and looked at Cale one last time. I'll never like you again. Who cares? Cale replied impatiently. He walked toward me. Eloin. Are you alright? He looked around, as if searching for someone. That guy didn't come with you today? He's really incompetent. Unlike me. I cut him off. It's none of your business. Cale froze for a moment, then finally spoke again. You don't need to defend him. I know you're soft-hearted and bad at judging people. Thorn is waiting for me in the parking lot, I said, looking at Cale. I might not be good at judging people, but I never regret what I've done. How about you? It seemed like my words hurt him. He spoke hoarsely. How can you say that about me? Suddenly, I noticed Thorn standing nearby, watching me quietly. His eyes filled with unease. Don't appear in front of me again. If you do, my boyfriend won't be happy. Cale finally left, looking like he had lost his soul. On the way back, I comforted Thorn for a long time, eventually agreeing to spend an entire day with him that weekend. At the restaurant where we had our first date, the waiter led me to the reserved private room, but it was pitch dark inside. I fumbled for the light switch, and with a bang, confetti and streamers fell from the ceiling. Jessa, who had been away on a business trip, stood there with tears in her eyes. The candles formed a heart shape on the table, and on the wall were some decorations I had shared with Thorn not long ago. I had said I liked them. He held a ring, his expression slightly nervous, kneeling on one knee. His friends and his mother were beside him. Thorn spoke. Eloin, will you marry me and build a new family with me? I promise to love only you for the rest of my life. Despite being someone who had sworn off marriage, I clearly heard myself say, I will. His body stiff, and as he stood, clearly off balance from the rush of emotions, before pulling me into his arms and placing a soft kiss on my forehead, my mother-in-law wiped away a tear, taking Thorn's hand in hers. Eloin has suffered a lot in her life. You have to treat her well. Turning to me, she added, Eloin, if anything ever troubles you, come to me. Our family will always be your support. The wedding was set for a warm spring day. As I sat in the fitting room, waiting for the ceremony to begin, the door suddenly swung open, and Cale stepped in. His face held a mix of anxiety and expectation. It's not too late to regret it, he said. I couldn't help but laugh. His expression seemed to carry the hope that I might change my mind. Cale. I love Thorn. He muttered to himself. Maybe one day you won't love him anymore. His words, in that moment, were infuriating. Cale. You're wrong. I will only keep loving Thorn. When we walk together. When he proposes. When we tackle company projects. When we go on business trips. Working towards a better future together. He is always in my path. In my future plans. Perhaps it was Thorn's love that gave me endless courage. The self-doubt I once felt was gone. The figure outside the door froze for a moment before slowly stepping in and pulling me into his arms. By the time we came to our senses, Cale had already disappeared. Later, my mother-in-law occasionally mentioned Cale, saying he had gone south to develop his career, trying to redeem himself while waiting for someone. I smiled but didn't say anything. Thorn placed the brewed tea in front of my mother-in-law and shared a quiet smile with me. with the warmth of love surrounding me. I couldn't remember the troubles of the past. The small mistakes of youth no longer seemed to matter in the face of life's important decisions. That night, Thorne kissed me again and again. No matter how many years we'd been married, his love for me was as strong as when we first met. People around us seemed to be constantly breaking up and getting back together. But with each passing day, our love only grew deeper.